So this is the basement actually at Christopher, when we bought it, it was just an unfinished basement. When we bought this, the original idea was just to turn it around into a single family home. When the day we bought it, we went down to the basement, which you always find some fun and interesting things in those. They actually, so this one just as a funny, there was a cat litter box that had cat litter in it, and you know, people leave their stuff. We're like, oh, that's terrible. Until we found out they hadn't had a cat for 8 years. But there was still a cat litter box with poop in it. So just kind of odd. And this is the same basement. We're up in the ceiling here. They had some sheathing up, which was odd. I thought it was like a cold air return that was done weird until we pulled it down, and dozens of liquor bottles fell out. So whoever had lived there had been an alcoholic, and that's where they hid their bottles from their significant other, was up in the ceiling in the basement. It was interesting. But when we went down there and finally got all of the junk and stuff out of the basement, we realized that there was already a full rough-in for a bathroom, not just a powder room, which was great. And then just based on the layout and conversations with a great realtor, we realized that the best option for this house was to do a house upstairs with a mortgage helper in the basement. Now, a mortgage helper is not a separate unit. So that's something where somebody would live in, and maybe their older parents would live in the basement, or vice versa, the other way around. The parents would live upstairs, young couple lives in the basement. So it's not quite the same. It doesn't have the same costs involved as doing a true second unit where you're bringing in your city inspectors and everything else for fire protection and all that kind of stuff. So those costs are much, much higher, especially in Cambridge.
Costs for renovating it into a second unit?
Into a true legal duplex. Yeah, if you want to do a true legal duplex right now in Cambridge, I would say don't. They've just brought them back in, and they are not doing very well with how they're allowing them to happen versus other cities. They're treating them as if they're new builds.
One thing to add to that I found out from the city is that if you are gonna have like one of those like mortgage helpers, the owner has to live there, first of all. So that's one of the rules. And second, it has to be less than 50% of the square footage of the home. So just to kind of keep that in mind as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. So this one, and that's why, so we decided on this one, we'd look to sell it to a younger couple who would want that mortgage helper to help them actually qualify. Because as we all know, with the changes to the mortgage industry that the government made to cool the markets, what they actually did was stop young people from buying homes. They didn't cool the market, they just stopped people who are younger from buying homes because they can't qualify. So by having that mortgage helper in there, we can, as mortgage agents, use that to help them if their parents are going to pay them rent to live there. So that goes towards their income.
And they will still allow income even if it's not a relative living there. Like as long as you've got
Yep.
the kitchen and the separate entrance, most of the people in this city don't have legal basement apartments, but they are either like have relatives living in them or they are renting them out. They did just legalize it in June. As Stefan pointed out, I apparently am the first person in Cambridge to have the first legal basement apartment. And it came with a lot of hidden surprises, so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very expensive, yeah.
Yeah.
And then every time you would do something, we also learned a lesson from that, I would say, because initially in the beginning, we're going, well, do we bring an engineer in, get a stamp drawing, and then, bypass all the city shenanigans, which in hindsight would have been prudent. Because every time they would send an inspector in, it was like, oh, that's gonna cost me more. Actually, one time we were trying to pull a bit of a fast one, and we were removing a wall upstairs, and we didn't want to go through the permits for that. We were doing permits for the basement, and that was all legal, but we were taking down a wall, so we'd already started the process, and then the inspector came, so we're trying to keep him downstairs and not let him in, and we've kind of got the view blocked, and everything was great, and we got him out of the house and didn't notice, and we were like, whew. And then the patio door wasn't functioning properly, so it didn't close behind him. And after he left, he saw that. Guard was down, we all walked away. He turned around to close the door, and then he saw inside. He came back and he was like, do you have a permit for that? It's like, crap,
My gosh.
there was gonna be another couple $1,000,
Yeah. And we didn't initially go with the engineer because we've done these in other cities. So, no problem, no issues. And then Cambridge comes along, they pass it. We're like, okay, well, no big deal. We know what we're doing. We know what was required. Until the city inspector comes out and they've had no training on doing secondary units in existing houses. So they're treating it as a new build. So I had to argue with the inspector every single time he came about what's in the code, what's not in the code, what falls under Section 11. Section 11 in the code is renovation. So it allows for things to be grandfathered in because they're existing. So we had some interesting arguments and a few times had to push him a bit. And the thing to remember with inspectors is even if you're right, yes, you can argue, you can take it right to the city and say, you know, this isn't right, this is not what the code says, I'm going to argue this, and you're going to wait 3 months before you can move ahead. So if what he's asking for has a minimal cost involved, just do it, don't bother. If it's something where it's going to cost you $100,000, well then yes, okay, argue it, but it's going to take months. And you're not allowed to progress on the project until you get past that argument. So
How did you have access to the building code? Like, how did you have access to the building code to confront him with that?
I've read it. I have a copy of it. You can just order them online, the current building code.
Yeah.
There's only so many sections. You won't use most of it if you're doing renovations in a house, your own house, or doing buy and holds or doing flips. You're not going to use much of it. You'll use mostly Section 11. And most of Section 11 you can just look up online. There are excerpts and everything else.
Right.
If you want the whole book, yes, but there's a lot of places where people will have posted the section of the book. So you can find Section 11, you can find Section 5, which is plumbing. You can find those sections online. Electrical has nothing to do with building code. So that's all ESA. And ESA, again, you can find online. And that's actually one of the more interesting things I've seen is when a building inspector and an ESA inspector are in the house at the same time. They don't like each other. They never do. And it's more the building inspectors who don't like ESA because ESA overrules building inspector. Always.
I tried looking and it's really hard to find or either you gotta buy it, it's like 150 or 200 bucks, and then I asked the inspector why this is not available. It's like because they want you to get a permit, so.
They want you to use the building inspector, yep. If you're going to do a flip or a buy and hold and you feel like you need it, just factor the $150 into your first flip and get yourself the code. Read through it. There's a lot of gray areas in the code, which is the problem with the Cambridge inspectors is they were not letting the gray areas happen, which they're actually supposed to on an existing structure. So it's good to have that knowledge. It's good to know when somebody's asking you to do something you shouldn't do, but it's also good for your own knowledge to know what should be done. It's the one thing we do always do is you can save money on the price of your flooring. You can save money on the toilet you buy or whether you buy a custom kitchen versus an IKEA kitchen. There's lots of ways to save money. Don't save money on your mechanicals. Don't save money on your structure. Because if that house falls down or it burns down and you kill someone, you'll live with that the rest of your life in prison. You're responsible. So those are not the places to cut corners. Never ever cut corners on those. Don't bury boxes in the walls. Don't duct tape electrical together. None of those things. Do it properly. Will you get a huge return on those things? No, but you'll sleep at night. So, and there's the basement after. So as you can see, we added a little kitchen down here. There's our laundry room. Behind here, there's a bathroom. We actually turned it into 3 bedrooms. There was enough room down there, so we actually put 3 bedrooms into the basement with a living area. So you had a 3+3, which was great. And we sold that house in 24 hours. First people who walked through it bought it.
Was it the first people?
Yep, they were the first. Yep.
Is that Christopher?
Christopher, yep. But again, and just as something to point out, which we'll talk about in a bit, so there's carpet in the basement. And that's a vinyl plank floor, and that's an IKEA kitchen. And would I put that in my own house? Probably not. But you know what? That's not my house. And that was, it looks nice, it looks clean, and it was inexpensive. So